The following text was unearthed from a wall, or unwalled if you want to be particular, in the well-appointed Exit Theater staff lounge. It was in a strange language and has been translated by writer, director, dramaturge, producer, and actor Mikl-em. The San Francisco Fringe Festival has its origins in a pagan ritual in the lower early Middle Ages, which took place somewhere in the vast expanse of desert in Nevada. Wandering nomads, some with delusional hallucinations, and others with just a mild case of ferrets, would take up simultaneous soapboxes once a year, filling the otherwise peaceful night with a vast hootenanny of what could later be rationalized as theater. For thousands of years, its legends and production values grew. The drooling, nearly naked performers of the early days gave way to the drooling, cheaply dressed artist of the more contemporary fringe, until eventually the cycle begins anew. Witness the neo-surrealist. The annual convention was at the time known as the Fernopixel, which was later shortened to the Fern and Ferngy, and finally the San Francisco Fringe Festival. These desert versions of the fest were full of the excitement of new and experimental theater. Here was the first staging of what would become known as sketch comedy, with the debut of the Wacky Pickle Patrol. This form has since gained in popularity, where many others, such as plague comedy and sketch melodrama, have not survived to modern times. In those days, there were few props and minimal costumes. Men played women's roles, and women played all the men's parts, a tradition which survives to this day. Around this time, a wandering and drunken witch doctor placed a curse on the festival. His solo show, Shrunken Head Medicine Show, didn't get in that year. He cast a spell of diminutive instrumentation upon the fest. Because of this, every year at least one and usually three shows feature a small guitar, ukulele, lute, etc. The Exit staff have brought in psychics to perform exorcisms, hoping to dispel the curse. Meanwhile, the profundity of accordions, squeeze boxes, bandolins, whatever, seems to have occurred naturally. Christina Agello, for those that don't know, is the 12th generation in her family to run the San Francisco Fringe Festival. There was an unfortunate schism in the lineage when her father and grandfather had a bitter disagreement over the spelling of the family name. So it was that in 1947, Leo Ogello departed for Scotland to found the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, an occurrence which has distorted the true chronology of the fringe phenomenon. While the Edinburgh Fringe wasn't first, it was innovative. Leo's drive for uncurated theater came from his distrust of his own tastes. He felt passionately that if it were up to him to choose the shows, he'd screw it up. So he instituted the practice of selecting shows by drawing names from a hat. Well, it was a goat's bladder, but Leo used to wear it on his head, so that counts. Edinburgh also added an audience to the frothy fringe mix. Prior to that, the fringe performers worked their magic alone in locked rooms. Among other problems, this meant it was hard to judge the relative quality of the shows. So Best of Fringe was awarded randomly. Of course, the critics at the time were more than happy to pan everything in absentia. In 1991, the San Francisco Fringe abandoned its original Nevada desert locale, which had become overrun with police, and medical personnel and relocated to San Francisco. Thereby, the fest fulfilled the destiny that had long been suggested by its name. The Fringe hit this city like a beautiful, grand, and exotic disease, newly introduced to the civilized world. The nexus for this theatrical outbreak was none other than the Exit Theater in the Tony, San Francisco theater district known as the Tenderloin. The Eddy Street you see out the exit front doors today is a far cry from the Eddy of 16 years ago. Gadflies and layabouts were everywhere. All manner of chinchannery was afoot. Hand buzzers, whoopee cushions, squirting flowers. It was like the waiting room for a Three Stooges audition. Hell on earth. Whereas most of the country adhered to the 21st Amendment repealing prohibition, Eddy Street and the Tenderloin generally kept on in their teetotaling ways until 1990 something. I forget exactly. There is nothing scarier than a street full of sober pranksters. Or is there? What if it's not a street, but a canal? That's right. Eddy Street was the center of San Francisco's famous Ye Old District of Theater and Canals, famous across the land for great moist thespians and theater in the boat. Alas, the district was doomed to fail because it only comprised 2 square blocks of the city. And the trouble and expense of getting boats far enough inland to utilize the canals proved unresolvable. But the exit adapted to the changing times and the receding waters, and soon began a series of mop-ins and moppenings, taking advantage of the collaborative and participatory mood of the late 1960s, which was in vogue in the loin during the early 90s. By the time the series was adjusting to the full return of alcohol and the converse drying and paving of Eddy Street in 1997, the quality and of the performances and productions had reached an all-time high. Amanda Ortmeyer joined the Exit production team, bringing along her knowledge of all the latest in theater technology, such as stage lighting. This innovation would prove to be decisive in bringing the theater to new levels of artistic success. With the addition of indoor plumbing for the 2000 Fringe Festival, audiences became much more comfortable seeing multiple shows. At this point, the manuscript appears to stop. No, there's no doubt that it really does stop. We are deprived of the details of the transition from Amanda's early experiments with flaming ceilings to the Exit's current system, an entirely self-contained fission canister immersion displacement setup, the only one on the block. But then the more recent history of the festival is better documented. Movable type and the massively worldwide interweb debut about this time. These papers are still being verified. Some experts have found inconsistencies. The whole canal business and the part about the Constitution, for example. When comparing this document with fully certified, notarized histories of the same area, there's also a guy who says he saw a shadowy figure typing these notes on the telltale pink legal paper in which they've appeared. And a beaten, he was typing on a beaten and catastrophized Olivetti on the floor of the 21 Club near closing last Tuesday. But you just can't trust what people say. This unofficial alternative soon to be suppressed history of the San Francisco Fringe Festival is presented as a tribute to Mikl-em.